Thank you for tuning into the 𝗘𝘂𝗿𝗀𝗀 podcast. We bring together young scholars, professionals, and experts to talk about the evolving relationship between the EU and China. To dive deeper into this theme, be sure to catch our new episodes every 2 weeks. Welcome to the 𝗘𝘂𝗿𝗀𝗀𝗿𝗀 community.
Welcome to the 𝗘𝘂𝗿𝗀𝗀𝗿𝗀 podcast. I'm Alessandro, and today I have the pleasure and honor to be here with Simone Pieranni, Italian journalist, writer, and now can we say podcaster?
Yeah, we can say this.
And podcaster, other than founder of amazing China Files. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So, you weren't always a famous journalist talking about China. How did you stumble into it?
It's a long story. I had tried to give a short version. I came in China in 2006 because I was working in tech sector. I was working with an Italian company working on data mining and neural network. And they want to open their branch here in China, so they asked me to come. Of course, I know what is China, where it is, but I don't know anything else. So I came here in Shanghai, and I learned a lot of things in that here because we have these Taiwanese and Chinese and Malaysian partners. So we set up the company, we hire people, we rent an office, and I lived there for 1 year working on this. Because I have an assistant, the Chinese one, I asked him to come in my home so he can teach me Chinese. He didn't speak English very well. I can speak Chinese, of course. So during that year, I live as a Chinese. We went to KTV, their restaurant. I live as a Chinese, a normal Chinese.
To live as a Chinese?
He has not a lot of money, so we have a very, I think Xi Jinping should like this, a very frugal life, you know? So, and we went in a place where Chinese were. So I didn't met a lot of foreigners during that period. Okay, sometimes I met some Italian businessmen just in the embassy when I went here in Beijing, but I understand immediately we have a very different life. And so when I came here in Beijing, I met some Italian guys that studied Chinese, and they were here just to study or, do some translation. It was very easy to live here in those periods. When I was in Beijing, my rent was 200 euros, and it was very easy to live here without a lot of money. So you can just, work for a month, then take rest. But we talk a lot about China, and they immediately told me, because I was already a journalist, but in Italy I was working on other topics, And so every time we talk about China, they always said, Italian newspaper doesn't tell the real China, doesn't describe the real China. So I say, why we don't do this? Why not? And they told me immediately, it's impossible. We think over it a lot of times, but it's impossible. So I came back to Shanghai. I quit my job. I came in Beijing. I rent an apartment. Oh, sorry, microphone.
I'm a tad bit worried about the mic, but okay, now it's perfect.
And I was very lucky because one night in Nanluoguxiang, in 2006, Nanluoguxiang was just a normal street, It wasn't like today. It's close to Gulo, and now it's a very touristic place. I met a girl, a Colombian journalist, and she had the same idea. So we start working on it, and we decide to call this website China Files, and we start putting on the website articles, reportage, interviews. Then we start also doing another kind of service. We start to translate a lot of Chinese bloggers during those years, there was a rise of bloggers here in China in 2008, 2009. For example, but not only bloggers. For example, we translated at time Wang Hunin, a lot of academians and professors that became very famous. For example, 𝗘𝘂𝗿𝗂𝗍𝗍, a professor that works a lot on workers. Hans Tribes is very famous paper he did at this time. Now it's working. He's working a lot on 𝗘𝗂𝗿𝗍𝗍, on riders and this kind of topic. And so we start, and suddenly in 2 or 3 years we were 11 people working every day. We have all salary, so it was a very nice experience. But it was a completely different China. It was easier. We were illegal. We have an office just close to here, but we registered the company in Hong Kong because it wasn't possible to register an editorial company here in Beijing. Some of us has the journalist visa, other kind of visa, and it was different from that. Today is impossible to do something like this.
Really?
Yeah, of course, because now, at that time, it was very easy to stay here in China because the visa policy was different. It was, you can buy a visa, you can buy a business visa, a multi-entry for 1 year or 2 years just with $1,000.
Oh, wow.
There were offices where you come and you buy the visa. Then they quit a lot of these kind of places here in China. You have to go to Hong Kong. Then they quit also in Hong Kong. And so become year after year more difficult to stay here in China with not a regular visa. But at the time it was very easy.
What did it mean at the time to do journalism on China or journalism as a foreigner in China?
I think we were very lucky because in those years China was growing up a lot. In 2008 there were the Olympics, then the Shanghai Expo, and there was a lot of attention on China because it was becoming what is today. So in Italy they ask for a lot of articles about China. They usually newspaper ask for sometimes really idiot articles.
So how did
the
it work?
skyscrapers, the billionaire, all the strange things, the weird things for them. So we say, okay, we don't write this kind of things. If you want, we do other things. We talk with Chinese. We try to understand better what's happening in the Chinese society, and we find a way to finance ourselves. We made a lot of press release for Italian banks from Chinese to Italian. And so with this money, we can, pay ourselves to go around in China. It was easy. Why? Because I have the journalist visa. I have just some problems at the beginning because, you have to go to the police station to talk with them. Very, very, very ridiculous chat. For example, they ask me, do you like China? Of course, I like a lot. What do you like of China? The food, It was, but they know they have to do, but they don't care. And during the Hu Jintao's era, there was no such control as today, so you can work easily. It was to us, it was a very incredible life here in Beijing. Every night there was something. Independent film festival, independent music festival. There were a lot of places where you can go to listen music, to meet writers, musicians, intellectuals. Of course, as a foreigner, we have a lot of guanxi with the artistic community. Of course, they were very eager to understand, our approach to China. They want to share opinion between Chinese and Westerners. It was great, that period, and we don't have any problem. Never. We cover all the things. We wrote articles about Tibet because
Really?
in 2008 there was not Taiwan, there was not Xinjiang. I went in Xinjiang, for example, with journalistic visa. I have my policemen with me. They follow me everywhere, but I can go there and I can write about this. I can write also about Tibet and all these kind of things. Then, of course, there were some red lines. You cannot talk, for example, about the black jail.
89,
And
89.
of course, but we interview a lot of times the mothers of 89 victims. You can do this. I went to Ai Weiwei's apartment a lot of time. I interviewed him a lot of time, and many others that then have a very complicated life. For example, the wife of Liu Xiaobo, because in 2008, there was the Nobel Prize for Liu Xiaobo. And it was very interesting because, for example, I don't agree with anything Liu Xiaobo write, anything. Yeah. But if this guy, because he writes something, is in jail, I have to stand with him, And for example, his life has a very bad life, and all his relatives. So we talk about this, we write about this without any problem. Then all changed after 2012, when the new leadership, took power. China changed in some way.
Do you think they were watching what you were writing, what you were reporting on, or it was something more like they didn't care too much for the moment?
Well, I don't know if I'm too naive, but I really, they don't care about what we write about China. Why? Because how many people read and speak Italian? 50 million, 60 million. Okay, they don't care. They are more interested in what Chinese, read, first of all, and what Americans or English speaking read. So, for example, American journalists were more controlled than us. But we were China Files, just a little company. New York Times have 20 people here. They cover a lot of things, from the economics to politics, and we are talking about journalistic superpower. So the Chinese government knows this. So there was a way, there was always a compromise. Chinese want to find a compromise every time. So I don't think, I think we have no problem also because they don't care about us, frankly. Sometimes I don't know if it's off the record, better maybe this one, okay. But sometimes I met some Italian journalists that came here because there was something, the Italian president, the Republic of president here in China, or prime minister or something like this. And they say, oh, I'm afraid. About what, about what? There's no reason, So it was a completely different world here in China at this time. But I don't think today as well they really care about what Italian journalists write about China. Of course, if you write something really sensitive for them, but nobody does. Nobody does.
Because there is a lot of I think something the Chinese government got great at is self-censorship.
Yes, of course. Because in the end, it's best work in the life to be a journalist, because yes, you have just to write what you see. But it's also a job. So so you are paid to do this. Your life depends on your salary in the end. So and stay here is a great experience and a great chance for everyone. So nobody wants to lose this kind of opportunity. And so why you have to put yourself in danger in some way? But someone did. Melissa Chan, for example, was expelled from the country just 10 years ago, I think. And it depends also by your personality, how much also you want to stay here in China. I knew a lot of journalists, foreign journalists, they really hate China.
Really?
They really don't like to stay here. So maybe, but they don't like to stay here, so they don't learn the language. They don't want to talk with Chinese. You can stay here in Beijing without talking with a Chinese. You can maybe now less than 10 years ago because there are less foreigners. But when I was here, when I lived here for my 10 years here in China, there were a lot of foreigners, so you can just stay with them and not with the Chinese. And a lot of journalists never talk with the Chinese. They don't care. So maybe they also don't have any intention to, put their hands in something sensitive.
You think this restraint pushes people who then talk about these topics or Chinese politics, these kind of things, to be people maybe outside and often with a very unclear and not first-hand view of what China really is?
Well, it's a big topic, this one. It's very hard to answer. Okay, let's say there are a lot of stereotypes and bias about China, of course. But in these years, in these last 10 years, because the information became more and more polarized, I observed something new, that it's not new now, but it was new 10 years ago. So we have, to be simple, we have people who think China is, bad because it's a dictatorship and because human rights and something that you can say it's not true. But there's this approach of China that everything is bad. For example, China is the most important countries in terms of electric vehicles. Yes, of course, because it's a dictatorship. It's a dictatorship. So everything is justified by this. Then I think also because of the mainstream media, now we have another kind of point of view about China, especially in the extreme left and extreme right. I don't know how to say this. Because they hate United States, everything in China is good. So you have to stay in these two fields, and it's very hard, because everything. For example, when I work in Manifesto, every time I write an article, there were right people accuse me to be paid by the Communist Party. Stalinist people who accuse me to be paid by CIA or United States government because I also write something about bad things happening in China, human rights stuff and arrests, repression, and so it's very hard, because now with the social, everyone thinks they can say something about place where they never live, they never talk with Chinese, but because United States is bad, China is good. United States is capitalism, China is socialist. So it's not so easy to. So I choose to stay in my line, that is trying to describe and tell China as I can write and tell United States stories as a normal country, in which, of course, you have something exceptional, like one-party states and this kind of thing. But I think it's also very important to say that one thing is the government and the Communist Party, and another thing is Chinese population, Chinese people. So it's a different level. Every time they ask me something about China, they are talking about Xi Jinping. They are not talking about Chinese, And I think it's more interesting now, especially now, try to describe what's happening in the Chinese society than in Chinese leadership. Also because nobody knows really what's happening in Chinese leadership. So you can take a look to their documents and they produce a lot of documents, papers, and white papers, and read out after meetings. But it's also you can find there a lot of propaganda. Then you talk with Chinese, and it's different. It's really different, their approach. You can find the nationalists, of course, but you can find also people not straightly critics about the government, but they think with their brain. They don't care about propaganda. They don't care about all this stuff. They have to live everyday lives, so they have their problems, and you can understand much better China if you talk with normal people. in China. Here in 𝗘𝘂𝗿𝗂, I talk a lot with there are old people, but there are also young people, no? And because I have children here in China, I find a new sources, the parents of these children. And for example, I observe two things. One, they are more eager to talk with foreigners than 10 years ago. Maybe because we are few here.
Hmm.
And second, because they want to say that now is not going well, when I ask them, it's bad.
Oh.
Uh,
Do you tell them you're a
how-
journalist?
No, they don't know anything about it. I'm a book something podcast producer, but they don't care. And so how is going? And they say, it's very hard because the school, I have to pay a lot of money for the school. The price are higher. My salary is the same. So, and
Is this a symptom of something?
yeah, of course, China grows a lot compared to our countries, but you have a generation, especially the young generation, that live in a prosperous world that suddenly doesn't go fast as in the past. So there are a lot of young people without job, for example, now. Then COVID was very hard here in China. You can see on the streets, it's something really new for me. For example, 10 years ago, it was impossible to see stores closed. Now you can see a lot of them. So there's something that is not working well. The leadership itself said this. When they talk about consumption, they understand that this is a problem. Chinese people save money historically, and now they save money more than in the past. They don't want to spend money, so it's a problem. Of course, they have to convince them to spend, but it's not something you can do in terms of economic numbers and these kind of things. You have to convince them, I can say psychologically, you have to convince them that the future is good, because now they are thinking that the future is not so good. They are more pessimistic than in the past, especially young people. And talking with, for example, a friend of mine, a girl, a woman, now, she told me, my parents, my grandparents, every day told me, take care, save money, because everything can happen, because maybe it's someone that lived, for example, the Cultural Revolution, all the stuff happening in the 90s, that were years in which China grows a lot, but a lot of people lost their job because the privatization of the state companies. No? So it's really hard to explain China. There are a lot of China, but I think now it's a very interesting period. Why? Because the leadership has to find a way to talk with young people and to justify their power, to justify why they are in power. Because until now, they justify their leadership because the country was growing a lot. They became rich in the end. But now it's not so. So why? So why there only one party here in China? So why I have to listen your words if I don't have a job? What are your answer to my problems now? So there's something like I think there's the need of new social pact, in China between the leadership and the population, the people, especially young people, because for example, a 70 years old guy, they understand all the words about the stability and these kind of things because they live in a very chaotic China. So nobody wants the chaos here in China. Nobody. They also justify, for example, what's happening in 1989 because it was a chaos, something chaotic, But young people don't have this kind of experience. They live in a very, normal country in some way. And if you ask to young Chinese people, many of them, if you ask them, do you feel yourself free, many of them, I'm sure they can reply to you, yes, I'm free. I have no problem. Why? No? But now, maybe something is changing. in 2022, the protest against lockdown, express some feelings of young people. Of course, it's urban young people, so it's middle class young people, but it's a huge part of the population. So I think now it's one of the most interesting moments to stay here in China, to observe what's happening inside the country, because we know what the leadership is going to tell us every day. We are powerful. We can, react to every United States bully behavior. We are strong. We are self-sufficient. We can manage this international situation. So they are very proud of this, but they also know they have a lot of problems in their daily life. For example, a lot of very young people, first of all, is just they studied, they saw their country, become rich, and they don't want to, to work in a factory or as a 𝗘𝗂𝗿𝗍, as a rider. So I think it's very interesting point.
I agree. Yesterday I was speaking to a classmate of mine, a Chinese classmate of mine, and he was telling me, we were talking about, the professor asked, a foreign professor was doing a lecture and asking, so what's a human right? What's a human right? What's a human right? And when he came to him, he said, freedom of speech. And I was shocked. One of the few Chinese guys in the class was saying freedom of speech is a human right. And then I asked him, and he said, I mean, we have freedom of speech in a way. But it's collective freedom. And he said in a way they're happy with it, but they want a bit more.
Yes,
from the new generations.
Of course, because the new generation knows very well what's happening around the world. It's a completely different generation from my generation. And when I came here in China with people of my age, I have very little to share. We have very little topics to share. We are completely different in some way. Now I think you and the young Chinese, you are very similar in some way. You live in the same world, really. As Chinese say, is 天下, under the same heaven in some way. You live the same international crisis, the same problems about rights, jobs, technology issues. So you can understand each other more, a lot. You can really understand each other, and you are living the same problem in some way. So I think this is a big change, and also is something like a hope for the future, because if this generation could share experiences and even struggle, so it's become more interesting, the world, I think, not only China or Italy. The problem is not, for example, I try to say something radical. The problem is not the Chinese Communist Party or United States government. The problem is the capitalism, maybe now. So this feeling should be something very interesting to share between generations. And I think this is very different. This is very new phenomenon now.
Thank you so much. I'll ask you some rapid fire questions. If you had to describe a Chinese person to a person that somehow in Europe never heard of Chinese people, how would you describe them?
In English, it's very hard.
Italian?
I try to explain. I try to explain the meaning of 𝗘𝗂𝗿𝗂 here in China. Not so I think it's better not to describe a person, because it's very impossible, but a way of life in some way. And maybe we have this bias about Chinese, that all Chinese are the same, first of all, and all Chinese are really yes men. It's not true. It's not so. The Chinese are really they want to struggle about everything. They are more rebels than we think, and they are less how can I say, organized than anything. Because when we talk about China, we say, oh, China is, they think over 20, for 40 years. But okay, the leadership maybe. Normal people is living under the 𝗘𝗂𝗿𝗀 rules, it's okay.
What's 𝗘𝗂𝗿𝗀?
𝗘𝗂𝗿𝗀 is the word to say, okay, more or less,
Very Italian in a way.
Very Italian in some way, very Italian from the south of Italy.
Yeah.
You can understand.
Yeah, I can totally understand.
You think it's something
When you said it,
works?
and somehow when I heard other interviews where you were describing a way of like,
Vabbè.
like almost, come on, it's good enough,
Yeah.
I felt there was, so is this kind of also why a reason why you feel so connected to China, to
Yeah,
Chinese
exactly.
people? You feel them close to us?
Yeah, okay, there are a lot of differences, of course, because the culture systems are different.
What do you think are the biggest differences? If you could put them in a box.
Well, but it's not a difference in terms of, Chinese and European. We are talking about Chinese now and European now. I think we put a lot of attention, for example, in politics. They care less about this.
Makes sense. They can't interact with it.
Exactly. So it's something really focused on the reality they are living.
And as socially, so I have actually a question that has really went in my brain a lot recently. There is a lot of discussion about the fact that Chinese children, this is the famous joke, 8-year-old, why don't he go play? 10 years, is only 10 years to the 𝗘𝗂𝗿𝗂𝗍. He has to study.
Yeah.
And do you think some people were saying to me that probably has an impact on the way they learn to socialize. The fact that they spend so much time studying and kind of there is a loss in that social.
Well, I can tell you about my experience here in the kindergarten, because we have two twins in a Chinese classroom, and the parents' behavior is really more strict than ours. They are more, they try to discipline. I don't know how to say. Discipline. Okay. And they are more rigorous in their, don't do this, don't do that. We are more free about this. And they are very busy. Yes, they are very busy. They have a lot of activities, play piano, studies English,
Already 5.
No, not at 5, but increasing the time. They are, and 10 years ago, I don't remember how many years ago, there was this phenomenon, the tiger mom. Chinese mother, really, really, really obsessed with children's studies, and they have to do a lot of things. So they were stressed, these guys. But I tell you one story. When I was here in China 20 years ago, I trained children in a football school. We went to the school, we took them, and we bring them to the playground in which they play football. I was the coach somewhere. I think it was 6 years ago, something like this. And it was 2 hours twice in a week. And one day, the father of one of them come to me and say, and he asked me, because my child is very busy. He have a lot to do. He have to study piano. He have to study English. And so this time here in playing football, I don't know if it's useful, And I asked him, what do you mean with useful? He's 6 years old. You have to enjoy. Said, no, do you think he can become Ronaldo? So I replied him, I don't know. He have to enjoy himself. He have just to stay with other people and play. This conversation told me a lot about the Chinese education in some way, because they are focused. Because here is a jungle, there are a lot of competitors in your life. So you have to be strong enough, to do the 𝗘𝗂𝗿𝗂𝗍. Then it depends, because for example in Guangdong, they don't want to come here in Beijing. But in other provinces, they have to come to Beijing to have a better life in the future, you know. So the rich regions and provinces, they can do in their province. But there are a lot of Gansu or other poor provinces. They have to come here to Beijing or to Shanghai or to important university to have a future. And they are obsessed with competition, of course. So it's a very hard world here in China, you know. I was shocked about this.
Do you think this affects them somehow in the long run? Maybe their social way of interacting?
I don't know. You have to ask to a psychologist, I think.
Probably you're right. I mean, thank you so much.
Thanks
This
to
was
you.
an incredible talk, and wish you good luck when coming back to Italy. You are competing for the 𝗘𝘂𝗿𝗄𝗃 premio 𝗘𝘂𝗃𝗃. It's a famous literary competition in Italy, and because your book 2100, speaking about Asia, its role in the world.
Yeah, it's not only about China, because I decided to write something about Asia, just not to write every time only about China.
But don't worry, there are other 2 or 3 books.
3 books.
3 books about China that you should get because they're amazing.
Yeah,
And
thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
And so thank you so much.
Thanks.
Really.
Thanks to you.
You've been listening to the European 𝗂𝗂𝗿𝗂𝗃 podcast. We hope today's conversation has sparked new ideas and insights for you. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast app. If you like our show, please leave us a comment on LinkedIn or share us with your friends. For suggestions on new episodes, you can reach us at 𝗂𝗂𝗿𝗂𝗃@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Until then, stay connected and stay curious.